Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Policy Gone Viral. Real pleased to be joined today by Chantal Lovell with the State Policy Network, an organization that serves all of the think tanks around the country on a variety of policy fronts. We are really pleased to be able to dive in today on a topic that a lot of Floridians probably don't know too much about, and that is worker freedom, worker opportunity. So Chantal, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Sal and Logan.
Well, let's jump right in. When we discuss this policy topic, what are we really talking about, kind of on the ground realities?
Yeah, so it really depends on the organization you're talking to. Broadly speaking, workplace freedom includes any reforms or efforts to give people more flexibility and options in the workplace. For State Policy Network and a lot of state-based think tanks like JMI, when we talk about workplace freedom, we are very specifically referring to a person's rights when it comes to union membership. So whether or not they have to pay a union as a condition of employment, or what rights they have in that space. Now, in Florida, of course, workers have long had this right because Florida is a right to work state, but there's a litany of other areas that fall within the workplace freedom category that could be pursued in Florida. So this could also include reforms to give workers the ability to regularly vote on which union represents them, or to just simply be notified of their rights, or have more transparency when it comes to their unions. Now, there are also some other organizations that consider anything having to do with a person's ability to earn a living as a workplace freedom issue. So in those cases, you might see policies related to occupational licensing come up, or the gig economy.
Great. And when we're talking about kind of labor policy, union regulations, ultimately we tend to think about where there might be kind of examples of either overreach or things going on that shouldn't. What are some of the kind of more egregious examples that we'll see potentially in Florida, but even in other states?
Yeah, so there's a lot of crazy, egregious stories to choose from. The Freedom Foundation, which is based on the West Coast, they have a number of lawsuits they're currently litigating that have to do with people who have had their signatures forged by unions to enroll them. So in these cases, we're not even talking about union members who have decided, you know what, this isn't for me, I want to leave the union. We're talking about people who have never decided to join a union, suddenly seeing dues leaving their paycheck. And to make matters worse, a lot of these workers are not government workers in the traditional sense that we would think of. They most often tend to be home healthcare workers who are working from their homes, providing service and aid to sick or elderly or disabled loved ones. And it turns out that the union has forged their signature so that they could deduct dues. So that's a collection of really egregious examples that we've seen out on the West Coast, but I would imagine are probably taking place elsewhere. There's also a story that I think is worth noting that has really stood out in my mind, because it's an example of a union really not working in the best interests of its members. This is the story of a woman named Susan Holleran. Susan, she works at a college in Minnesota, and she's been trying to leave her union since the day after she joined. She was at an employee training, got pulled out by a union organizer. She was pressured into signing a dues authorization card, which she did so she could get back to her training. She got home, she looked at the materials, and she realized that the dues were $700 a year. Now, that's a big chunk of change for most families in the United States. That's definitely an expenditure you want to think about. But for Susan, that was totally cost prohibitive, because Susan has cancer and is trying to pay for her ongoing treatments to fight this horrible disease. She called her union. She explained this and said, I can't afford these dues. And they told her, tough, you're in for a year. So yeah, it's really atrocious. I mean, this is, how can you not sympathize with her? And it's really one of those scenarios where you just think, what is this union thinking, not extending some grace to this person? So fortunately, the Liberty Justice Center is working to try to get her out of that union and get them to recognize her freedoms that she has.
So one of the first reactions we hear in Florida when we talk about this issue is Florida's a right to work state. We really don't have anything to worry about, right? Is this accurate?
So that is a common reaction from people in right to work states, but it is a misconception. So as I briefly mentioned, there's a lot of issues beyond just giving someone the ability to choose whether or not they pay a union that really affect their freedom in the workplace. So there are a lot of things that states like Florida could be doing to ensure that workers truly do have freedom when it comes to union membership and the union experience. But perhaps more importantly than this is a new requirement for government employers that comes as a result of a recent Supreme Court decision that some of your viewers may have heard about, the Janus versus Afscme decision. Now, the big headline of that decision is that it extended right to work protections to government workers nationwide, regardless of whether they live in a right to work state. But it also had a clause that is specific to states like Florida that already have right to work. The Janus decision, in addition to giving right to work to everyone, said that government employers cannot deduct dues on behalf of unions unless the union has provided proof that the member has affirmatively chosen to opt in. So in practice, that means that states should stop deducting union dues until the union can show a dues authorization card from a member that was signed after this decision came out in 2018. So in terms of Florida, the legislature could take action to stop dues deduction until this threshold has been met. And thanks to the great work of JMI and the coalition that you guys have built, Florida actually got farther than any other state legislature in 2020 in terms of trying to honor the Janus decision. So hopefully in 2021, the legislature will finalize those actions and ensure that every government worker is afforded a true choice in union membership.
Well, short of kind of legislative action, are other states doing anything through either their AG's office or the governor's office? Are there areas in which policy can be impacted on this without legislative policy?
Yes, so legislative action would have the most stay power. So I think it is probably the best route to go, but other states are trying different methods. So Alaska last year, the Attorney General issued an opinion saying, hey, I've read this Supreme Court decision. We're out of compliance. We need to get dues authorization from all of our members before we can continue deducting dues. The governor followed suit about a month later and issued an executive order saying we're not going to deduct dues until we have this proof of membership. That is unfortunately tied up in the courts, but it has caused other states to follow suit. So Indiana, the Attorney General there recently issued an opinion. Michigan, which is a purple state, actually took similar steps through their Civil Service Commission. So there are a few paths to ensure that the Janus decision is honored. But unfortunately, a Supreme Court decision doesn't just automatically become implemented after it's issued. It usually does require a lot of work by the states to ensure that the workers do experience the protections that are afforded to them by the courts.
Well, Chantal, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Policy Gone Viral. We're thankful for all the work that you're doing at SPN, helping us here in Florida and states across the country to protect the rights of workers and worker freedom.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all you guys are doing in Florida. I think Florida can really pave the way in 2021 for some good workplace freedom reform.
Thank you.